Thank you, everybody, and welcome to our presentation. I hope you had a good lunch and are now ready and excited to learn something about our view framework comparison for Liferay DXP. This here is Peter, and I am Koen. We are both Liferay experts at COIN, a business unit of ACA IT-Solutions. COIN stands for Content and Information, and we are specialized in enterprise content management and portal solutions. The big question today is, well, with Liferay DXP, which framework are we going to use now for the view? Because everything is changing in Liferay DXP. And we, developers, we are free to choose from, well, a huge amount of web frameworks available to implement our portlets. That decision is actually really influenced by many, many arguments. Some people, some reserve developers, they want to stick to Liferay as close as possible, just for the ease of use and all the comfort that they get from that. Some people, well, if you're a little bit like me, you don't really like to write JavaScript, so you tend to move away from those frameworks. Or some possibly the customer, he implies a view framework on you. For instance, the third argument, the customer wants you to write in Vaadin. And then you have like the reckless younglings who can't wait to get their hands on a new single-page application framework and just want to try that out in Liferay. So what is the best framework, and what does that actually mean to be the best framework? That's something that we are going to try and figure out today. So all you have to do is sit back, relax, and watch our horses race.
Yeah. So actually the first thing we did, because there are a lot of frameworks already available, is to categorize all those frameworks to see, okay, what kind of frameworks can I use already today for creating Liferay portlets? And then we see we have client-side frameworks, we have server-side frameworks, we have frameworks that focus more on components, UI components, such as jQuery UI, Prime Faces, or frameworks that focus more on controller-based functionality, like an AngularJS or Liferay's own Liferay MVC. Of course, this is not a complete list, but we use this list to, well, make a selection for what frameworks we wanted to investigate. And we selected 4 of them. So we'll go over them one by one. The first selection is LUI as a client-side library in combination with Liferay MVC. As a second, we have investigated the use of Vaadin in Liferay. As a third framework, we have the combination between JSF and the UI component library Liferay Faces Alloy. And then, last but not least, the combination of AngularJS on Liferay MVC backend. So those are the 4 frameworks that we investigated and the 4 frameworks we compared. So we'll proceed now by first going more in depth on each technology, showing the advantages, disadvantages, things we should be taking care of. And after that, we'll go over all the criteria that we use to evaluate all those frameworks. And at that point, the horse races can commence. Very exciting. So, how can we correctly compare those frameworks? What we did was to implement the very same portlet in all 4 technology stacks. So, this portlet shows a paginated list of jockeys. Every jockey has an ID, a name, a horse, a team. You can filter the list by team. You can go to the detail of a jockey, and so on. So, a very basic portlet, but enough to make a comparison between all those frameworks. So, and this allows us to, for example, compare stuff like amount of code that we need to write, amount of JavaScript, complexity, footprint, and so on. So, yeah.
Yeah. So let's get started with the first view framework, Liferay MVC as the server-side framework with AlloUI as the JavaScript component framework. Now, I probably don't have to tell you this, but this is like the default framework of Liferay. This is what they recommend you to use, that you get support for out of the box. And every default Liferay portlet is built with this stack, which is pretty neat because your own portlet, if you go to the view of it, you don't need to do any of the styling yourselves. If you use AlloUI, the entire portlet is just styled immediately with the Liferay look and feel. So you don't need to add any custom styling. And on top of that, if you ever need to provide a new design for your customer, for instance with theming, you both style your portlet and Liferay defaults with just one styling set. The actual code behind all of these views, they exist of a few Java classes and several JSPs. This here is the JSP representing the previous view that we saw with, for example, the select component now highlighted. So the JSP is actually where you initialize all the Allo UI components. The more complex components, such as the data table, the paginator, etc., you initialize them with JavaScript. Kind of a lot of JavaScript. Actually, this JSP file, 75% of it consists of JavaScript. We had to use 3 modules, the data table, the paginator, and then also the Liferay portlet URL together with that request module to get AJAX requests for the pagination itself, but also for navigating to the detailed page. So actually, I believe that's quite a lot already that we needed to do. And well, how to figure out how to use these components? Well, luckily there is an AlloUI.com website with some documentation and example code. But still, when I was looking through it, I actually found that the example codes on there, they're really simplified, and there's no real description of all the properties and the methods you get for all the components. So there still is quite a steep learning curve to actually be using those Allo UI components in a real-life portlet. The server-side code behind all of this, that's actually pretty neat, because now with Liferay DXP, your traditional portlet class, that is just an OSGI component, and so you can use any OSGI services right in there. And also, all the action classes, they also became components now, and that's the one you see here at the top. This is our jockey detail, which responds to, it's an action command that responds to the action URL to navigate to the detail page. And you can see at top the add component annotation, and then the add reference so that we can just inject our own OSGI services. So to conclude, Liferay MVC, Allo UI, it's fully compatible with OSGI and of course with Liferay. It's very easy to style, you don't have any work to do, but you have to write a certain amount of JavaScript.
Right. Next up is Vaadin. Vaadin is an open source web framework for building rich web applications. Now, Vaadin is a little bit special in that it has a pure server-side architecture, which means that all of your code is written in Java. So not only the controller code, also the UI components are real Java classes. And you can compare Vaadin a little bit with Swing, but then for the web. Now, there is no official compatibility between Vaadin and DXP. Vaadin has compatibility with OSGI, but the combination of Vaadin and DXP has not yet been formalized. Now, there have been some nice efforts to bridge the gap on GitHub by Samsa Solman. So we use those examples to form actually a working Vaadin portlet in Liferay. So thank you, Samsa, for that. Now, how does such a Vaadin application look like? Actually, the entrance class of a Vaadin application is the UI class, which extends from Vaadin's own UI class. And that one is really a component, an OSGI component. So the same here as for MVC. You can use a component annotation. You can reference your own or Liferay's own services in that. And you use that UI class to basically form your basic layout of your application. Using Vaadin components. Those components, like I said before, they are also just Java objects, which means that you can just subclass an existing component of Vaadin, do your own logic in there. For example, in this case, fill a dropdown with some themes, and you have a working Vaadin component. So how does that look like when you see the end result of it? Well, Vaadin portlets look pretty nice from the start, thanks to a lot of built-in theming in the framework. So your effort to style a Vaadin portlet from scratch is really, really low. Of course, when you need to bring this in par with real Liferay styling, you have some work because the Vaadin themes are not really compatible with Liferay theme, but there are solutions for that. So, well, to conclude, Vaadin is really a great choice for Java developers who want to rapidly create good-looking applications, portlets in Liferay. And we just hope that Liferay and Vaadin cooperate some more to make the bridge a little bit more standard in DXP.
Yeah. Next technology, JSF, short for Java Server Faces. It's an official Java specification for building component-based user interfaces. Now, in the past, Liferay, they performed a huge amount of effort to actually ensure the compatibility of the JSF portlets inside the Liferay portlets, thanks to Neil Griffin and his team of the Liferay Faces Bridge. However, in Liferay DXP, things are a little bit more complex because now in the OSGI architecture, there is a mismatch between JSF and well, OSGI. So JSF, that framework actually expects a traditional WAR file, while OSGI, that runtime, it actually expects a bundle. So that's a big mismatch. Liferay resolved that by providing you with a WAP generator. A WAP stands for Web Application Bundle. So what it actually does is it takes your traditional WAR file that you get from JSF and transforms that into a web application bundle, which can then easily be deployed inside the OSGI runtime. So yeah, problem solved. Not entirely, because the downside is the JSF beans, they still live inside their own JSF context, while all of the OSGI registered services, they still live inside the OSGI context. And there's no real link between those. Out in the market, there are several solutions for that, and for our example portlets, we chose to use a custom EL resolver, which allows us easily to inject any of the OSGI services as a managed property inside all of the JSF managed beans. So together with those two well, tricks, you can easily create a JSF portlet for Liferay DXP. If we take a look at the view, yeah, Peter mentioned before, we used Liferay Faces Alloy, and hooray for that, because with that we also get the immediate Liferay look and feel styling. It is not as mature as any of the other JSF component frameworks as Prime Faces or something, but there are two big advantages. The first one is that the styling, I mean, that's great, because I don't like to write some CSS. And the second big advantage is that the usage of Liferay Faces Alloy, it's just fully supported with your Liferay subscription. Thus, if you have any problem using that, you can just spam Liferay with all your LESA tickets, and well, they need to figure out what is wrong and provide a solution for you. So JSF, together with Liferay Faces Alloy, it's not fully OSGI compatible. There are two tricks for that. So once you get that, it's actually still a viable option to use, because it's a really cool way to write your portlets.
So last but not least, Angular. AngularJS is an open source JavaScript-based framework for creating single-page applications. In this presentation, we're handling Angular 1. We know that Angular 2 is officially out, but our work to integrate it into DXP has not yet been completed, it's still in progress, so we won't be giving any result for that here. But yeah, as for Angular 1, also there's no real explicit support for Angular in DXP. Of course, there's always a little bit of a mismatch between single-page applications and a portal like Liferay, because a single-page application assumes that it has full control over the page, and also that it exists as the only application on the page, while portlets, yeah, they exist with multiple portlets on the same page and don't really have direct control over the URL. So in that case, already there is a mismatch. Luckily, there have been some efforts in the community to bridge that gap as well. Our colleague, Jan Eerdekes, he has written a great set of blog posts proving that integration between Angular and Liferay is certainly possible. Now, in this presentation, we won't be focusing on the complex integration part. We'll just mention the advantages, disadvantages of this approach. Speaking of advantages, well, Angular is a client-side library, which means most of your code is written in JavaScript. But unlike a framework like LUI, your code, well, Angular really demands that your code is a little bit structured into services, components, partials. So every piece of JavaScript code really has its place and is also well known and good readable by other Angular developers. So that's really a plus. Also for the backend, well, you have to, Angular is a client-side library. You still have to combine it with something server-side. And in this case, you can still use the MVC portlet that Koen already mentions. So in this case also, it's fully OSGI compatible. You can just use your annotations and inject your own declarative services. Angular itself doesn't really deliver any UI components from itself. So if you want to provide the user with rich components, and such as a data table, a tree view, some modal dialogues, you still have to find some component library that integrates well with Angular. Those are two good examples of such libraries. So yeah, it's best to use one of those if you really want to provide a rich experience for the user. To conclude, for Angular, yeah, with some experience, you can really build good Angular portals in Liferay, which are architecturally clean and performant. But of course, it's only useful if you can combine it with some rich component library to present a rich user experience to the user.
All right, so well, that concludes our high-level overview of well, the chosen portlet technologies. Coming back to our question now, which framework are we going to use, or have we decided to use? So it's time to evaluate each one against another, and well, this is where the really fun part starts, because it wouldn't be a horse derby themed presentation if our horses wouldn't have been lined up and are ready to race. We use a couple of, well, objective criteria to actually compare all the frameworks, and the first one, productivity, in the sense that how many lines of code did we need to write to actually get the same results in all of those frameworks. So let's go. Well, we see that Vaadin and JSF, they already take the lead. AlloUI and AngularJS are behind because, well, we had to write a certain amount of JavaScript next to the server-side code. Right, Peter?
Yeah, that's right. So next criterion is memory footprint. I remember that we built the very same portlet in all technologies, and we have taken a look at, okay, how big is the module that we created? A bigger module will consume much more server resources. So the smaller the module, the better. So, and we see here that, yeah, AlloUI, AlloUI and Vaadin are the big winners here because they have a module size of under 100 kilobytes, which is very, very small. AngularJS is a little bit higher. It has more or less half a megabyte of module size. Yeah, and JSF is the big loser here because, yeah, it has to package all those CSF faces bridge libraries, and it has a size of over 5 megabytes. So that's not too bad, but I see Vaadin is taking the lead here.
Yeah, Vaadin going up strong. Well, let's look at styling compatibility. How much effort did we need to make to style the portlets just as the default Liferay one? And I don't think there's going to be a big surprise here that AlloUI and also JSF with the Liferay Faces Alloy components library, they take a big leap now forward. Vaadin, Angular, well, we have to style them just to match Liferay style. So, well, it's going to be a close one.
Mm-hmm. Now, if your team wants to well, commit to a certain technology stack, you also want to be sure that, yeah, that stack is really supported by Liferay. Yeah? That's a very important criterion. Because if something goes wrong, you want to rely on Liferay for fixing that. At the moment, only AlloUI and JSF are really supported by a Liferay subscription. So, which means that for the other two technologies, you're a little bit left on your own or on the community to resolve your problems, which gives them a little bit of a drawback. And AlloUI is taking the lead now.
Yeah, wow, going strong. No, it didn't click. Let's look at the JavaScript footprint. I mentioned before, I'm not a huge fan of writing JavaScript. It has some less IDE support. Testing in JavaScript isn't all that common. Debugging your code is a little bit hard. So let's see the results of that stretch. And yeah, it's becoming a real neck and neck race now between the first three ones. As mentioned, AlloUI, you have to write some JavaScript. AngularJS, of course you have to write JavaScript. Vaadin, JSF, well, going up now because they hide away all the JavaScript for you.
Exciting. So, next up, OSGI compatibility. Of course, with Liferay DXP and OSGI, you want to also make sure that your portlet really is a good OSGI citizen and that you can use all the all the specs and all the information and details that OSGI supplies for you. So what we see here, because LUI and Angular really support on Liferay DXP for the backend, they are fully OSGI capable, which is perfect. Vaadin also on itself is a very OSGI compatible library, so that's not a problem either. Yeah, JSF, as mentioned before, is not really compatible with OSGI, will maybe never really be, but there are some workarounds available, and I heard from Neil yesterday that the team is also working on a decent bridge between the two, so there's hope for that. Currently is a little bit lagging behind here. So yeah, LUI and Vaadin.
Yeah, becoming a neck and neck race. Let's look at the Liferay user base. Yeah, how many users actually use this technology in their day-to-day portlet development, Liferay portlet development? We based ourselves on Google Trends and Stack Overflow, and I don't think it's also a big surprise that LUI is the big winner, of course, closely followed by JSF, so also a lot of developers there. Vaadin, a little bit smaller, and AngularJS, just a few developers. So yeah, I think it's going to be exciting for the last stretch.
Indeed. Because this is the last criterion, and it's about documentation. So how much documentation can be found for each technology, and more specifically, how much documentation can be found in combination with implementation in Liferay. And we see here that for JSF, not only the Faces Bridge, JSF itself, but also the different UI component libraries that you can use are very well documented. Well, Vaadin and Angular and also LUI are also pretty good documented, but not really so much in the context of Liferay DXP integration. For LUI, certainly, in our opinion, it should have a much clearer, much better documentation, being the default choice for Liferay developers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so who actually won? It's kind of exciting, it was. It seems that it's a really close call with LUI, JSF, and also Vaadin. Now we want to say, and hopefully you already picked it up, all of the technologies, they have their own strengths, they have their own weaknesses, and you should actually see for yourselves which of the criteria is really important for you. For instance, if you rely on the Liferay support, yeah, you just don't go for AngularJS and don't go for Vaadin. If you hate to write some JavaScript, yeah, definitely stay away from AngularJS. But yeah, we also recommend to stay away from LUI. If memory footprint and OSGI compatibility are a real deal breaker for you, yeah, then JSF just isn't the right choice. Peter?
That's true. Still, we at Coin, we have a strong preference for the JSF stack, because for us, it forms the best balance between productivity, cleanness of code, and robustness. And of course, also the fact that we can rely on Liferay for support. Of course, for ourselves, we're always keeping an eye on new trends, new technologies, new possibilities. So it's very well possible that in a year or two, we might have a preference for another stack. And we encourage actually you to do the same, to keep an eye on everything that's moving and see what works best for you today and tomorrow, and make a pretty good choice for that then. So actually, this concludes the presentation. All the code samples can be found on our Bitbucket. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, you can ask them now or come by at our booth so we can have a chat. But thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And we have some time left for some questions. I can reckon, oh, I see lots of hands, so you have to ask.
Hi. I know that with DXP, the new stack is Metal.js and Soy. Did you try it, and what do you think about it?
We didn't investigate those client-side libraries yet, because for now it was still possible to work with LUI and Liferay MVC. We didn't investigate those new technologies yet. We are totally in the progress of investigating much other technology stacks as well, so this can very well be one of them, and we will add them to our list of comparison. Yeah.
Actually, two questions. Did you compare performance, for example, on those things? And maybe also one of the major parts is upgradable. So is it very easily to upgrade to a next level library?
Yeah, because for the second part of your question, it's a little bit hard because in that case, well, Liferay DXP is pretty new in terms of how you have to develop your portlet. So yes, there will be some effort if you created something in 6.2 and moved that to DXP. We didn't do any tests on that for this presentation. Also, performance-wise, that was on our list to do, but it didn't make it to the presentation. But it's indeed a very interesting point to look at. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more? Yep. Two. You was first. Yeah.
Hello. Thanks for the nice presentation.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's been 1 year we are using 6.2, Liferay 6.2, and 2 months ago I need to present Liferay to another R&D department. So the first time I say LOUI, they said, what is that? We never heard about that. Who is backing that? And then when they heard that Liferay doesn't support LOUI out of the box, I lost the war. I didn't able to convince them to use Liferay. So no matter whatever the result you are getting, Angular is very popular, backing by Google. So I expect sooner than later Liferay should natively integrate it. So what do you think about that?
I cannot look into the future. I can also not know what Liferay's plans are with Angular support. Liferay has their own Senna.js single-page application framework in place as well, which is not really the same as what Angular does, but it has some overlap. So it's a very difficult question, and maybe we could ask that question to Liferay directly, because I'm not sure I can answer that correctly. No. But yeah, it's something to consider. Yeah.
One of the downsides of Vaadin is that you have to do the styling twice. Did you ever hear of a solution to have a converter to convert the styling for the Liferay directly into the styling for the Vaadin plugins?
What do you mean exactly by doing the styling twice?
You said with the other solutions you can get a styling out of the Liferay framework, so you can do the theming there, and you have to do you don't have to do the theming again inside the Vaadin's plugin. So is there any kind of bridge or solution or converter to do that?
Not really that I'm aware of. Yeah, what you of course can do is to create a Vaadin theme that make your Vaadin portlets look like as if they were Liferay portlets, really built-in Liferay portlets. But of course, if you want to use your custom styling, you will always have to define styling twice indeed, one for Liferay default portlets and one for your Vaadin portlets. So I'm not aware of any bridges for that. I'm not the Vaadin expert, but yeah.
Any more questions? Time for maybe one? No? Then may I have a warm applause for Peter and Koen.
Thank you. Okay.